In September 2024, I moved from sunny Southern California to a Western Mass that was in the throes of a beautiful fall. For a variety of reasons at the time, I decided that I needed to make this move with only what would fit in the back of my 2015 Nissan Pathfinder. It would soon become abundantly clear that I had overestimated the amount of trunk space I had in that car and severely underestimated the amount of books I owned. Before what I now think of as the Great Cull, I owned around 200 books. After, I was left with less than 20. Now that it's been over 8 months with my forced by circumstances minimalist lifestyle, I have a lot of thoughts and questions. I'm really approaching this with a lot of curiosity because I feel like this experience has really touched on broader topics like consumerism and identity, the publishing industry, and even how books impact the environment. I've come to realize that buying books and reading are two completely different hobbies. Even though I literally possessed 10 times more books 8 months ago, I still read just as much, if not more, now. A lot of people buy and display books that they have no intention of reading, a fairly common thing among like rich people on Architectural Digest, where they just buy a bunch of bulk old books to fill up their bookshelves. But personally, I bought books fully with the intention of reading them, but somehow I just never got around to it, and soon the ratio of unread to read books in my collection just blossomed until probably the point where 60% of my collection was unread books to 40% read. There's nothing inherently wrong with having a lot of books that you've never read, but this made me realize something important, which is that I never read physical books nowadays. So far in 2025, I've read 17 books. Not a single one of them was a physical book. Every single one was either an ebook or an audiobook that I got from Spotify, Hoopla, or Libby. And yet in the total time since I've moved, I've acquired 9 books and only read one of them. Part of the urge to acquire books for me is that reading is a part of my identity, and having books in my space and displaying them is a way for me to communicate that part of my identity. Books are just pleasant physical objects to have around. I love the way that they look, the aesthetic of them, the way that their spines look, the smell of them. I will always love physical books, and I will always love supporting independent local bookstores. Honestly, even going to Barnes & Noble is so nostalgic for me, and I love Barnes & Noble. I want authors and editors to be able to make livings and make money. And so I think I'm treating the downsizing of my library as more of an opportunity, not as a hard and fast rule of I'm not allowed to buy books, but to be more mindful of how I curate my collection going forward. Instead of being comprised mostly of books I haven't read, to be a real reflection of my taste as a reader, really as a reflection of what I love and my soul. I'm super privileged and lucky to be able to live close to a bunch of used bookstores. And so one of my goals is creating a list of books that I have already read and love, and I know I want to have them in my collection, especially books like classics, Frankenstein, Pride and Prejudice. These are books that I want to have, I don't currently own. I think it would be really fun to go to these used bookstores and look for fun vintage editions of these books. Slowly, over time, build my collection. Not only is this really great for my wallet, it's also a fun sort of game and activity for myself to do. When I got rid of all my books, I made the perhaps controversial decision to get rid of my mass market paperback Wheel of Time books. These were the same copies that I had read as a kid, and I did have like a twinge of regret because they are very sentimental copies. I adored these books growing up, but at the same time, I felt like I didn't want to keep around my tattered copy of The Great Hunt that's literally in 2 pieces. And instead, now that I know that I want nice copies of the Wheel of Time, I can wait and save up and really splurge out on some nice special edition. Like for example, eventually when the leather-bound Eye of the World comes out from Dragonsteel, that's something that I want to invest in. All of what I'm talking about definitely falls under the broader umbrella of minimalism that not everyone is down for. Not everyone wants to be a minimalist. Some people, the idea of having your tattered copy of The Great Hunt brings you a lot of comfort. I'm not trying to invalidate that in any way. This is just my personal preference at this point in my life. A lot of this is also informed by the fact that I'm currently renting, and I know that the apartment I'm living in is not going to be my final resting place. Moving books is absolutely the worst. Like, they are so bulky, so heavy, and they take up so much space. But yeah, I don't want anything in this video to come off as prescriptive. This is just me sort of spitballing all these thoughts that I'm having about books and consumerism. And I also want to say that having 20 books even is a huge privilege, and that's a lot of books. Everything is relative, and you know, some people have 500 books, some people have 10 books, some people don't own any books. That doesn't have any bearing on you as a reader. Owning books and reading are two completely different spheres. This is all I kept, and as you can see, it's just a lot of special editions like illustrated books or Folio Society. That copy of Lavinia is signed. A lot of these books are signed actually. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. And I've read pretty much all of these except for The Inheritance. I haven't finished it yet, and The Annotated Mrs. Dalloway. And then down here are books that I've acquired since moving. I read Wind and Truth, and I'm currently in the middle of The Making of the Atomic Bomb. This is a lot more doable as a TBR shelf than having like 150 books that I haven't read. So yeah, and then the entire bottom shelf is just empty. So this is my updated bookshelf tour. I have little trinkets up there in case anyone cared. Something cool about restarting my book collection is that it's now much easier for me to potentially inventory my personal library. This is something that I always wanted to do, but the time and energy required to inventory 200 books was just not something that I was willing to put the effort into. But now I can just enter all the info for my books that I currently have, and then the upkeep on it will be so much more sustainable. There are some downsides to the Great Cull. First, I already touched on this, but I loved the aesthetic of having a lot of books in my space. It was so lovely when people would come over to my apartment and just stand in front of my bookcase and look at all the books I had, and they would ask questions about books, and it was such a great conversation starter. I would always let people borrow books too, and I didn't even care if they would bring it back or not. Whereas now, if you walk into my apartment, it's not immediately obvious that reading is a huge part of my identity. The second con, I would say, is in this era of digitization, I'm always constantly wary of what happens if Amazon goes out of business and all of my ebooks go down with them. That could happen. I just hate how digital media is really dependent on the whims of tech CEOs. Even though I almost exclusively read digital books these days, I don't want to give up my physical book library. That's all I really have to say about this topic for now. I hope this video made you think about your own approach to how you buy books and curating your book collection. I'd love to hear from you guys what goes through your mind as you're walking through a bookstore. There's a whole debate you could have about used books versus new books. Some people are so specific about how they want their books to look, and they want their spines to line up. So many different things to talk about when it comes to acquiring physical books. Leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.